Basically, the findings have been that in pretty much every case, so whether they're looking at psilocybin's effectiveness in treating depression or whether they're looking at it for treating addiction, it's been significantly more effective than current treatments by as much as 2 times in the case of depression. So if you look at SSRI drugs, which are currently the most widely used drug to treat depression, their effectiveness rate is between 20 and 40%. But the preliminary studies that have been done on psilocybin, and I want to stress preliminary because there have not been any clinical trials that have concluded yet, but there are multiple that are in phase 3, so they're getting close. But yeah, for depression, it was found to have an effectiveness rate of close to 80%.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who's out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. I'm Bob Nickman, and my guest today is Jeff Lebowe from Spores Lab, and we're going to be talking about mushrooms, magic mushrooms, gourmet mushrooms, psilocybin, and the benefits of microdosing. So stay tuned for that. First, I'd like to invite you to visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com. Over there, you can listen to all the episodes, read synopses of the episodes, see photos of my guests, little bio on myself, and there is a donate button if you'd like to support the show. That will also give you access to some extra content. There's also a YouTube channel which you can subscribe to listen to the episodes. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman, add with Bob Nickman. And you can also listen on the Facebook page, The Exploding Human. So plenty of ways to listen to the show. As I said, my guest today is Jeff Lebowe. Jeff is one of the partners in a new company called Spores Lab, located in Canada. That's sporeslab.io if you want to go check them out. They are all about helping people to learn how to grow mushrooms. They sell mushroom spores and cultures and grow kits. They also consult very extensively. If you have any questions, give them a call. And we got into some interesting things that I didn't know about mushrooms, some of the health benefits in treating depression, addiction, anxiety, trauma, some physical issues that you may have. And then we talked a little bit about the hallucinagenic experience. And Jeff is a font of knowledge in this arena, which I knew very little about, and now I know a lot more that I've talked to him. So please listen in. This is Jeff Lebowe.
Great to be here, Bob.
Yeah, and you're all the way in Canada, so our neighbor to the north, and you are you the entire Spores Lab, or is it a whole group of people or a small group of people?
Well, I'm one of 5 partners in the business, and then we also have 2 full-time employees. We started about a year ago now. It was August of 2020, and it's grown pretty quickly since then. So it started off with me and 2 other partners, and then we've brought in an additional 2 partners and now have 2 employees as well. We're trying to be really, really above board with Spores Lab and keep everything on the legal side. So we don't sell any dried mushrooms. We don't sell any finished mushroom products. We only sell mushroom genetics and growing supplies, growing mediums, growing equipment. And that is legal because there is no psilocybin or psilocin in a mushroom spore. So those are the actual compounds that are illegal under the Canadian Controlled Drugs and Substances Act and the UN Psychotropic Substances Act. And I'm not sure what it's called in the States.
Yeah, I don't know either. I've been out of the world of that kind of stuff for a long time, although I'm very interested in what is transpiring in the microdose
Yes.
piece of
Yeah,
this thing. And I've watched several, like I was telling you before the podcast, that I've watched several videos on this stuff. And so I'm interested in that. And I did go to your website and I did see a lot of the equipment. It seems very scientific, clinical, and clean.
yeah.
I don't know what the words are. You guys have thought it out. And I enjoyed, looking at all the equipment, and it seems like, it's not easy. It's probably, well, it's not simple. It's probably easy if you're diligent. But there's a lot of pieces to growing something for the use of. Well, let's talk about what are the uses and the types of mushroom that you're dealing with and the uses.
Yeah, for sure. So we sell all sorts of mushroom species. Actually, we have 38 different mushroom species on our website, and now the majority of those are in the Psilocybin genus. So the magic, quote unquote, magic mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're trying to, and this kind of goes back to staying on the legal side of things. We're trying to be a mycology company that sells some psilocybin stuff, and then just have our phone number all over the internet. We have our address all over the internet. So we are trying to be totally above board and on the legal side of things. But yeah, as for growing, it definitely is a bit of a process. But what we're trying to do is make it as easy as possible for people. So we have a ton of information on our website about different growing mediums, about different growing techniques, different growing methods, all sorts of stuff. So we're kind of not just selling a spore syringe and the equipment, but we're also selling, or not selling, actually giving away the information and the knowledge on how to grow.
Are most of these grown indoors? Is that how it's done?
Correct. Yeah, most often. And there is one species in the Psilocybin genus that is much more prevalent than any other ones, and that is called Psilocybin cubensis. So pretty much any mushroom that you're going to find or be able to buy and consume is going to be a Psilocybin cubensis.
Yeah, because I wonder, like I was telling you before, that I had done some mushroom experimentation. Oh gosh, 40 years ago, long time ago. Yeah. Had a great time doing it. I don't do any drugs or alcohol for a really long time, almost 36 years that I haven't done anything, because I had a tendency to do way too much. But the interesting thing you said to me is that some of these microdosing, and we're talking about doses that do absolutely nothing to get you high in the conventional sense, have properties of helping with addiction. How does that work?
It's addiction, depression, PTSD, anxiety, and then there's starting to be some research coming out about neurodegenerative disorders, so Alzheimer's, dementia, other things in that sort of space, or that sector. But yeah, basically the theory behind a microdose is that you're taking about 1/10 of a hallucinogenic dose. So you feel no acute effects. You don't feel any differences in your perception. You don't hallucinate at all, but you do get the proven neurological benefits of psilocybin. And some of those benefits are the stimulation of a few different neurotransmitters, the incitement of a hyperconnected brain state, dampening of a network in the brain called the default mode network. And that network is associated with a lot of conditions like anxiety, depression, PTSD, and addiction as well. So in my opinion, the research obviously isn't, the science on this isn't decided yet. But I think that it's the dampening effect on the default mode network of the brain that causes a microdose or a macrodose to be so effective.
Well, I know that there's a number of universities that are doing studies in this stuff for quite some time.
Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Johns Hopkins, University of Toronto, Berkeley, University of British Columbia would be some of the larger names. But there's probably 30 plus accredited, prestigious universities that are seriously looking at this.
What are some of the findings, what you're talking about, that there's really a big improvement in people's lives for, I'm really interested in the two major things I'm interested in are addiction. how a drug can help you with addiction issues and also trauma. I think that's probably the biggest thing that affects the most people on the planet in whatever form it takes, because everyone's got some of that and some to huge degrees, some lesser.
I mean, basically, the findings have been that in pretty much every case, so whether they're looking at psilocybin's effectiveness in treating depression or whether they're looking at it for treating addiction, it's been significantly more effective than current treatments by as much as 2 times in the case of depression. So if you look at SSRI drugs, which are currently the most widely used drug to treat depression, their effectiveness rate is between 20 and 40%. But the preliminary studies that have been done on psilocybin, and I want to stress preliminary because there have not been any clinical trials that have concluded yet, but there are multiple that are in phase 3, so they're getting close. But yeah, for depression, it was found to have an effectiveness rate of close to 80%.
Wow, there's so many variables though when you're taking something that comes out of the ground as opposed to something manufactured in a lab. I'm not advocating for either one. I'm just saying that, there's the strain, the quality, the dosage, the person's metabolism. Somebody buys a grow kit and all the equipment from you guys, they grow it. How do they know what a microdose is? How do you figure that out for, each person is going to be a little different, I would assume.
For sure. In the case of the studies, most of it is done with synthetic psilocybin, so not actual mushrooms, because you're totally correct that there is a lot of variance in mycology in general. Mycology is defined as the study of mushrooms. And this is the same for all mushroom species. But basically every single mushroom culture has its own genetic code. In that sense, they're more similar to humans than they are to plants. So, if you were to buy a grow kit from us and grow it, and then you were to come back 6 months later and buy the exact same strain grow kit and grow it again, there would be slight differences in the active compounds that are contained in there. So basically, that's what all the licenses that have been given out to research psilocybin. There are 2 so far in Canada, 2 companies that are currently growing psilocybin mushrooms and trying to formulate a consistent product that could be used that could be prescribed, basically.
When you said something about synthetic psilocybin, I'm a little bit wondering how different that is from something that's being grown in the ground. It seems like there'd be a missing piece to it of energy, of something that you can't maybe even quantify.
You're exactly right, and it's a great analogy to cannabis. A few years ago, when before cannabis was legalized, everyone was only talking about THC, and now there is CBD, there's CBG, there's I think it's over 100 other cannabinoids that have been found and have been started to be researched. So it's the same for psilocybin mushrooms. I believe that there is an entourage effect that will give you a different experience taking an actual mushroom versus the synthetic psilocybin, because there are up to 35 psychotropic alkaloids that have been found in psilocybin mushrooms, and psilocybin is only one of those.
And what are there other mushrooms that you're selling to grow? Others, I guess, spores.
Yes, we have a few different species. We kind of separated into gourmet and active. So on the gourmet side of things, we've got lion's mane, we've got reishi, we've got a few different species of oyster mushroom, we've got shiitake, we've got wine cap, we've got cinnamon cap. And then on the active side, the vast majority of what we offer is Psilocybe cubensis. And that's just because it's the easiest one to grow indoors. But we do have some of the other strains coming up soon, like Psilocybe cyanescens, Psilocybe azurescens, Panaeolus cyanescens. So all of these mushrooms are in the same genus. And I don't know how much you know about biology, but basically it's classed as genus, then species, then variety. So the Psilocybe genus would be, the highest order, and then species would split into, for example, cubensis, azurescens, cyanescens, and then the next level below that would be the strains. So if you're online, you've probably heard people talking about different mushroom strains. Maybe you've heard of one called penis envy.
I did now.
So yeah,
good title.
The cubensis species is the only one that's really been grown enough for people to differentiate their own strains of it. But yeah, so it's by far the most common that you'll find is some sort of Psilocybin cubensis.
Okay, and the gourmet side is food. It's
yeah,
like what do you recommend for a salad kind of mushrooms? But those have healing effects too, from what the little bit I've read. I know, you're talking to somebody that knows very little about this, but I'm very interested at the same time.
Okay. Well, if I'm going too fast and if you don't understand any of the terminology I'm using, feel free to stop me and I'll explain it.
No, I understand everything you're saying. I just don't, this is all, I remember genus and all those words from biology class a million years ago. Were you guys like biology type people and went to college, or you just figured this shit out on your own?
Both, I guess. One of our partners has a background in microbiology. Myself, I am just high school educated, but I have quite a bit of hands-on experience with mycology.
Yeah, it sounds great. I mean, it's really like it's kind of an underground thing that's starting to sprout and become above ground for the world to use. And I think there's probably, correct me if I'm wrong, a feeling that you want to help. That's the feeling I get when I went to your website. Like these folks believe in this. They want to get the information out there. They also want to make an okay living doing it, but it's also, it's important. I feel that you guys think it's important to get it out there, especially when you think about big pharma and how much it's decimated, the culture and gotten people hooked on a lot of crap.
Yeah, no, definitely. We really are trying to center our website around the knowledge, and also sell products, but have that knowledge and be first and foremost. So I'm really glad that came through when you were looking at the website.
Yeah, it did. I was happy to see that, and a couple of talks that I watched on YouTube from some other people. It kind of brought that to the forefront too. I really felt like the people in this world, which I know, I'm just finding out about, actually care a lot about making something available that has been around way before pharmaceutical companies and will continue to be around, but has become this. There's a lot of fear around this stuff because isn't it funny though how stuff that grows in the ground is feared, but the stuff made in the lab is like somehow, quote, better?
The whole modality of the current, the pharmaceutical space, they're trying to treat stuff. They're not trying to cure conditions. Whereas with psilocybin, a lot of these studies coming out, the one in specific that I'm going to reference here was from Johns Hopkins University. But it found that I believe it was in the high 60s% of people who had a psilocybin experience. And this study was looking at treating depression, had long-term relief from their symptoms with one dose.
And this was a hallucinogenic level dose?
Correct. Yeah, that was a high dose. And it was also administered under the guidance of a therapist. So that actually is another important note. Most of these studies that are showing the really high effectiveness rates, it's not just you take your psilocybin and you're automatically healed, you're magically healed. It's you take the psilocybin and during the experience you work through your trauma with a therapist.
So it heightens consciousness to where the insights become clear and long lasting. And that's the part I find really fascinating. Like why, when you come down, you have a long lasting effect. You're able to remember it on a level that isn't probably in the mind. It's somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. I think Mr. Stamets, Paul Stamets, who you mentioned earlier, has a great analogy for that. And so part of the effects of psilocybin as a function of dampening activity in the default mode network, it can serve to kind of erase some of your habits. So the analogy that Mr. Stamets uses is a sled track in the winter. And every time you go down that sled track, the grooves get deeper and deeper and deeper. What psilocybin does, or what a psychedelic experience does, is provides a fresh blanket of snow. And then next time you slide down that hill, you're not stuck into your rut. You can go wherever you want.
That's pretty fascinating.
I think in the case of microdosing, there are some quantifiable effects. One of those would be the stimulation of the process of neurogenesis, so the creation of new brain cells. And another one would be the dampening of the default mode network. That's been observed under fMRI imaging and been shown to be happening while you are on psilocybin, even at small dosage.
So new brain cells, like, give me an example of like how that would work in, let's say, depression or any sort of issue. Like, how do it causes you to generate new brain cells in certain areas?
Yeah, correct. It stimulates the production of a neurotransmitter called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And when you have elevated levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor in the brain, the process of neurogenesis is stimulated. Yeah.
No one told me that until just now.
It's literally making you smarter when you take magic mushrooms. Or actually, that's not totally accurate. It's giving you the capacity to be smarter.
Have you seen, and we're going to go with anecdotal evidence here. We don't need to do science here for a second. Some situations where people's lives have improved. And can you give me an example? Because I love what I would call a case study of just one person or two people. Just guy came to me. He was suicidal. He did this much microdosing, and now he's, swinging from trees. He's smiling and he's happy.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few stories like that out there. We've received quite a few reviews from many customers stating that, even actually from one customer in specific who is in Alberta, so one province over from us, actually felt that just the act of growing the mushrooms, not even consuming them, helped her anxiety. But yeah, I think the story about someone, coming to psychedelics and having a psychedelic experience and having it be really transformative and meaningful is pretty widespread.
Yeah, I mean, I experienced that myself. I think there was some permanent knowledge that kind of came to me, a certain way of seeing the world that was new.
Yes, definitely.
I didn't like walk around feeling like I did while I was tripping, but after that, it definitely confirmed some ideas that I thought were possible, and I went, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense now.
I think in a broad sense, it definitely makes you more questioning, and I think a lot of people could be well served by being a little bit more questioning.
I've been a questioning person for a very long time. And sometimes the answers I get make me upset. So, I'm like, are we really this foolish as a species? Is usually what I come to. And I'm either, I choose to try to laugh about it and not be too upset because I don't think I can do much except my own little corner.
Yeah.
But this is part of it, is to educate people on possibilities so they can open up their minds to possibly finding solutions that are less toxic for sure. If you were, let's say somebody's listening to this podcast and they've suffered with addiction or depression or anxiety, all very common things, particularly anxiety. I mean, almost everyone feels anxious. It's a very fast-paced, chaotic world these days. And what would you recommend in terms of, let's say they go to the website and they get this stuff and they're really interested and they grow it, and then let's say they've never done a hallucinogenic level dose or at all, and they've never done microdosing. What would you have any thoughts about, like what you would say? I guess everyone's a little different, but
For sure, it will be slightly different for everyone, but I would recommend starting off with some sort of microdosing protocol or microdosing regimen, to kind of acclimate yourself a little bit to the substance, even though you are not feeling any acute effects when you're microdosing. And then for your first kind of full experience, I would recommend being with either a therapist or someone that you trust, that will be sober, that can kind of guide you through the experience if need be. Another recommendation I would have is listening to the playlist that's put together by Johns Hopkins University. They, over years of study, put together about an hour, I think it's actually almost 2 hour long playlist, specifically noting the tempo and everything, and where each song is placed in the playlist. And they use that playlist whenever they are doing any of their studies.
What is it, like binaural beats or something like that, or is it?
Yeah, it's a mix. It's some of that. It's a fair amount of classical music.
There is a lot to and sound and vibration, and I think that is also what happens when you get in a heightened state of consciousness with certain psychedelics, that you vibrate differently.
Definitely. Yeah, I can personally attest to that as well. I know when I take mushrooms, I feel a vibration.
Right. And a sense of well-being that,
it's hard to describe, but yeah. No, just like calm, like you said, well-being, and just kind of like this vibrating resonance that it's hard to put your finger on it, but it's an experience that I think most people could benefit from.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I can sense in a much stronger way the parts of the atmosphere that don't have objects in it, like the space between you and me. You can sort of sense that it's all one thing, that it's connected.
Yeah.
That there's no such thing as nothing, kind of thing. That's that's the allure of this stuff, and for me on the hallucinogenic level. Now, let's say somebody is doing this for depression. Is there a protocol for the length of time someone needs to? Is it forever, the rest of your life, or is it a 2-year period that's ideal? What has science come to with that so far? Research.
So right now, it's looking undecided. Basically, there's been quite a bit of variance. I would say that if you want to start microdosing or have a full experience to treat your depression or PTSD or anxiety or addiction, you would want to have that full experience under the guidance of a therapist. And then you'd want to continue that with a microdosing protocol. 2 common ones are 4 days on, 3 days off, or once every 3rd day, and just kind of continue that until you feel like you don't need it anymore. Typically, that would be between 3 and 4 months, judging by most of the research that's come out.
Oh, okay. That's a very short time.
For sure. When you compare it to SSRIs, that if you're taking SSRIs, you're going to be taking them possibly for the rest of your life. And paying.
That's exactly what they tell you. It's like, you're going to be doing this the rest of your life, sir or ma'am. So, and if it stops working, we'll find you another one. And what a perfect way to make a lot of money is to convince somebody that they need something the rest of their lives.
I can't argue with that.
Yeah. And that just never seemed to be correct to me. But I do suppose there are conditions where people do need that. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but I love this idea of finding ways to improve your life that you can do, you don't have to go conventional. If it doesn't work, stop. That's right.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about the microdosing too, right? Is like you kind of have nothing to lose. You're not gonna hallucinate. You're not going to have really any adverse effects. Like psilocybin is completely non-toxic. There's no LD40. There's very little reported side effects, even at high dosage. The only reported negative side effects is temporary uncomfort.
Yeah, I can't remember. It was so long ago if I felt like nauseous or anything like that. That must have been the pizza I had.
My theory on that is actually that most of the time when people do get indigestion or what's commonly called gut rot from eating magic mushrooms, it's because there's other forms of fungi growing on those mushrooms. They weren't grown in a really sterile area. They weren't dried properly. Because if you eat fresh mushrooms, that just doesn't happen.
When you're microdosing, how do you know the amount? Like, how do you know how much to cut off of it and swallow?
That's a good question. Typically, the average hallucinogenic dose is somewhere around 2 grams. So the microdose is defined as 1/10 of that. So based on obviously a 250-pound male is going to have a different dose than a 110-pound female. But somewhere in the 100 to 200 milligram range would be considered a microdose.
So you would just weigh it?
Yes. There's a lot of people out there selling pre-weighed capsules. So those are actually quite easy to find. But if you can't find any pre-made capsules, you could make your own capsules, or you could just break off a small piece of the mushroom and weigh it out. And there's fairly consistent potency throughout the mushroom. The cap is slightly more, but it's negligible. It's like under 0.1% difference.
Oh, that's okay.
It doesn't really matter whether you take the cap or the stem.
So let's talk about addiction for a second, because what I was saying to you before we started is that as somebody that didn't know when to stop and then couldn't until I was able to, but eventually, what about the quality of taking psilocybin would help somebody that's in the, would it also help with alcohol too, is what I mean, is it just drug addiction, other types of drugs? And what does that do? How does it mitigate? Does it mitigate cravings? And does it deal with the feeling, the feelings underneath the I'm not good enough, and the spiritual malady piece of addiction?
Yeah, so it has been looked at for alcohol and other drugs. Some studies actually done in the 1960s on psychedelics and treating alcoholism. But I believe that the reason why they're so effective in treating addiction is again back to that default mode network. Kind of serves as a psychedelic experience can serve as a reset of your default mode network, so it can effectively erase habits that you have. And then it's also been shown to kind of just put you in a better mood overall, both during the experience and for the couple days after. And then if you follow that with a microdosing protocol, a lot of people also report improved mood. So I think it's a combination of feeling better after doing the psychedelic, about yourself and just in general, and the quantifiable effects on the default mode network.
Are they using any of this stuff in treatment centers?
Yes, they are. Yeah, there's at least 2 that I know of in Canada, and they're actually using a whole variety of psychedelics. It's psilocybin mushrooms. They're looking at LSD. They're looking at ketamine, and they're also looking at MDMA. I don't think MDMA so much for addiction. I think that's more for depression / PTSD. But yeah, there's quite a few psychedelics that we're figuring out are effective in treating a bunch of mental health conditions.
Do you think Canada's a little bit further along and open-minded in this area? I don't know the difference between here and Canada with this stuff, but it seems like every time I've gone on the websites or the YouTube to look at videos, everybody's from Canada talking about mushrooms.
Yeah, I do think Canada is, actually leading the world in, at least for the psilocybin mushroom space. They've given licenses to multiple publicly traded companies to research and develop a psilocybin-based treatment. Health Canada has also given about 20 exemptions to patients that are suffering from terminal illness to take psilocybin legally. And they've also started to get a framework together for doctors to administer psilocybin.
Wow.
Now, Oregon, actually, so I spoke a little bit too soon. Oregon is the one state that may be ahead of us.
Okay, well, that's close to Canada.
They've actually decriminalized psilocybin mushrooms, period, and legalized them if you are using them under the guidance of a therapist.
Yeah, I read that. I was like, damn, that's really fascinating. So this goes so far back in time.
Definitely.
In history of, and I don't even like to use the word indigenous because everybody's sort of indigenous to where they're from, but or primitive. I don't like any of that stuff because, I guess more connected to the earth cultures, which I guess we all were at one time. Yeah. But it goes back. I mean, I guess we can read about this from way back.
For sure. Yeah. I think the earliest like concrete evidence is rock art. So murals, and that's about 6,000 years old. But there's multiple theories that state, or multiple hypotheses, I should say, that state that it's very possible that humans have been using psychedelic mushrooms since we became evolutionarily distinct. So since we became Homo sapiens, and I believe that's about 200,000 years ago.
It's amazing. I wonder who the first guy was, because one guy went, "I'm going to try that," and the other goes, "I'm going to try that." The first guy dies. He eats a poisonous one. The second guy goes, "Oh man, I'm having a great time."
Yeah, and going back to the whole neurogenesis thing and the creation of new brain cells, there's actually one hypothesis put forward by Terence McKenna, who's pretty big in the psychedelic world, that states that, or that hypothesizes that psychedelic mushrooms and taking psychedelic mushrooms were one of the catalysts for the doubling of the human brain size.
That is quite a statement.
Quite a statement. And then also responsible for some of the developments such as art and communication, language, society. So it's a pretty large statement to make, but it's also, you can extrapolate from having a psychedelic experience and see how that would be kind of an evolutionary benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at it as, well, humans have had to eat since the beginning to survive. Yeah. And so that is a plant that grows, and it's food in one sense. So why not? Why wouldn't that have been integrated directly into every culture at some level? But the idea that certain plants are sacred is kind of an interesting idea too. That people experimented and realized we need to respect this for what it is, and not go overboard with it to have it turn on us in some way. It's like anything. If you eat too many carrots, your skin's going to turn orange.
Yeah, and it's interesting how native cultures, or whatever word you want to use, those cultures across the world have similar names for mushrooms, have art for mushrooms, and it's all kind of connected to spirituality. And in the case of a lot of cultures, specifically Central American cultures, they believe that the mushrooms were given to them by the gods. Central American, the Nahuatl language, actually the direct translation of their word for magic mushrooms, which is Teocananatl or something like that, translates to flesh of the gods. Mm. Yeah, the Egyptians as well. Their translation of magic mushroom in the ancient Egyptian language is sons of the gods. Actually, and there's a few Egyptologists out there, while we're on the topic of Egypt in specific, that theorize that the Egyptians actually cultivated magic mushrooms.
Do you have any books for somebody that is, let's say, I'm curious, I've never really explored this. Is there a great book to start with that would open somebody's eyes to a little bit of history and a little bit of the chemistry type thing and the effects, all that? I'm sure there's some great books.
Definitely. Yeah, I would say Psilocybin Mushrooms of the World by Paul Stamets is a pretty good one that kind of covers a lot of different species. It covers a little bit of history, and it also covers some more modern science. Stamets has been one of the few people that's been able to get some psilocybin species tested. So there's some really good information in that book. And Stamets in general, actually, I would say that would be a really good starting point for someone that wants to learn more, is just look into Paul Stamets.
Yeah, that's one of the YouTube videos I watched.
Yeah.
He was very scholarly in his approach to talking about this stuff. I don't know what he's like to sit down with and, have a cup of coffee, but he seemed pretty scholarly.
Well, unfortunately, I've never met him, but I would love to.
He lives in Canada, right?
I believe he lives, I think it's Washington, but he's
okay.
like near Vancouver Island. I'm pretty sure he lives on an island in.
All right. Well, that could be a good day trip for you and the Spores Lab people to.
Yeah, get some mushroom foraging while we're at it.
Yeah,
there's a few species that are only known to grow in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, okay. So it's like salmon.
Yeah.
The best salmon in the Pacific Northwest. If you've never had salmon from there, well, maybe Canada's got it too, I would think, because the water's clean. Wow, this is really fascinating stuff. I'm wrestling with experimentation. I don't think I'm going to do it, but I'm heavy into meditation. I think that may be as far as I'm willing to risk with my mind at this point.
Yeah. A possible intermediary step would be taking lion's mane mushroom. It's been shown to have some of the same neurological benefits as psilocybin, specifically in the case of the neurogenesis kind of side of it. Lion's mane has also been proven to stimulate neurogenesis, and it also has a bunch of physical health benefits like cardiovascular health, for example. But yeah, I would say that would be a good way to kind of ease into at least.
Okay. You're saying Lion?
Yeah, lion's mane. So
mane, like the hair, lion's mane.
Exactly. LIONMANE. And that's completely legal to buy everywhere. Interestingly, we're at least in Canada, we're seeing the price of a pound of lion's mane mushroom approach the cost of a pound of magic mushrooms. So
how much is a pound? What's a pound going for?
Well, I guess it depends on whether you're in Vancouver or Toronto.
Okay. Well, anywhere.
Vancouver, I've been hearing like $400 to $500 a pound, and
really?
lion's mane is $200 to $300.
Okay.
Toronto, I would say for the magic mushrooms, you'd be closer to $1,000. But I try to stay out of that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm wondering, that was actually sort of one thing I wanted to talk about, some sort of a caution in terms of big pharma taking over this thing and wrecking it, or, wrecking the quality and making it this commercialized nonsense that doesn't really serve people. They must be looking at this stuff, obviously. If they're not stupid that way. I mean, they're very aware, probably even of what you're doing.
Yeah, actually, I have spoken with a few pharmaceutical executives. We were just thinking about applying for one of the research and development licenses, and we're still kind of talking about it, but we haven't actually made the application yet. But yeah, I do think for the pharmaceutical industry being able to kind of take over, I think that the demographic of people that would be interested in taking a psilocybin mushroom product are generally the demographic of people that are more against pharmaceuticals. So I think they are going to have a hard time kind of stealing market share from people that would rather take a psychedelic treatment or rather take a unconventional treatment.
That's good to hear. Let's keep it mom and pop as much as we can.
Even if you look at the stock prices of most of the pharmaceutical giants, I think they're beginning to be on their way out.
That is a nice thought. That whole better living through chemistry thing has taken a bad turn for the better, for the populace to realize that maybe these people aren't doing things in your best interests, and it's all about their pocketbook for the most part. That's certainly a thing to be aware of. I just want to thank you for your time and all the great work you're doing. If people want to check it out, it's sporeslab.com. Is that correct?
Sporeslab.io. So SPORESLAB.io.
Okay. IO is a Canadian extension.
IO is typically used for tech companies, but we want to stay away from .ca just because I've heard that the authorities frown upon you using .ca websites for some of the more gray stuff. Now, Spores Lab is legal at the end of the day, and we have solicited multiple legal opinions before we started, but we're just kind of trying to fly under the radar as much as we can.
I get that. I would do the same thing.
Yeah.
And well, so check out this website because it's pretty damn cool. It's a very well done website. The graphics are fantastic. It's easy to understand. The pictures are very clean and clear. I like a good navigating website. You've done that.
Thank you for the feedback.
Yeah, no, really good, which makes you want to use that particular company because you figure, well, if they're doing that so well, it's the face of the company. It's good stuff, man.
We have two full-time people that are completely devoted to customer service. So, if you have any questions about anything on our website, anything to do with growing in general, whether it's lion's mane or magic mushrooms, don't hesitate to send us a message.
Good info. Thanks, Jeff. You have a wonderful day.
No worries, Bob. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you guys for listening in to The Exploding Human. Big thanks to Jeff Lebowe of Spores Lab. Go check out the website. Lots of great information over there if you're interested. And subscribe to the YouTube channel, The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Go to the website, theexplodinghuman.com. If you'd like to donate, you'll have access to extra content. Much appreciated having you guys come to The Exploding Human, listen to all the episodes. Big thanks to you, and have a wonderful day.